So let's talk about what everybody's afraid of, failure. But in reality, these videos will give you a different perspective to seeing failure and make you realize that the more you fail, or the better you get at failing, the more you get at succeeding at whatever it is that you're doing. So this is coming from the chapter 21 of this book, A Diary of a CEO. And it's a book that I will convince you to get. And mind you, please share this video if you ever find it helpful. And if you watch this video to the very end, it's a sign that you take yourself very, very serious. So yes, it's titled, You Must Outfail the Competition. So when you zoom out and see the most successful companies, not just most successful, the most successful companies that have been there for a while, they have the highest success rates. At the same time, they have the highest failure rate. I mean, if you look at the works of everything in life, every single thing, and I'll be relating this back to women, according to you guys, because that is something that a lot of guys like to hear, right? So when it comes to business, IBM, the CEO of IBM, I think Watson, says that whenever an employee makes a $600,000 mistake, what that means is he has just spent $600,000 in training that employee. There's a reason IBM is still in business today. There's a reason why Steve Jobs, who I would always reference over and over again, he made a statement that for Apple to stay successful, it has to stay hungry and stay foolish. Stay hungry means that regardless of how much you have in the bank, we shouldn't look at that. We should look at the future. We should be hungry enough to keep innovating. We should be foolish enough to keep trying things out. And like I said, if you think about it, right, why are we really afraid of failure? And if you zoom into the idea of failure, is the only reason we are really afraid of failure, right, is the judgment we might get from other people. One, two, it's the emotions that we will feel, which in the end is silly judgment, the time that's been wasted, and the emotions we feel about it. Now, let's take it out of business line. Let's try something else. Tiger Woods. There's a reason the best golfers, if we remove Tiger Woods, there's a reason the best golfers, they have the most swings in practice. And the irony is that, so there's also a concept called the razor's edge, right? The razor's edge is like this, that if you gather any situation, right, any sports, any business, the company that's always the number one, right, has so much edge over the number two. What that means is, if number one earns $1 million, number two is probably earning 500,000. If the number one company in the world has a net worth of, or has a revenue of $1 billion, the number two probably has a revenue of what, 1 billion. That the number ones always have everything, right? And if you zoom out, the effort they put to becoming that number one is like what, no more than 10% of what number two is doing. The effort, but the reward is completely different. Completely different. The people who have the best swings, right, who win in golf the most, they just swung extra 2 times than those who are practicing to become number two. For instance, if the person who is number two added maybe 4 extra swings per training session, then there's a high chance that he could be number one. Speaking of that, people zoom out and look at a company like Amazon, and they don't realize that Amazon has so much failures. Like I will say that Jeff Bezos is a king at framing, but still he's also a king at failure. But who really talks about the failure? From the search engine to the Fire Mobile to a lot of devices, basically. But yet they have the largest success. Zooming out again, football. Messi and Ronaldo, they have the highest goals ever scored, right? But at the same time, they have the highest goals ever missed. I'm saying this because I'm going to keep saying this over and over again. We all buy this idea of, we all like to buy this idea of somebody starts one business and that one business is the most successful business person has ever tried. Well, that happens quite alright. I'm going to lie, that happens. But if you zoom out, the companies that still have the wildest success still have the wildest failures. And it boils down, and it keeps hitting me hard, because if you read the Bhagavad Gita, it's a part where, because I'm a firm believer that everybody should read spiritual texts, spiritual books, because spiritual books, right, they have a kind of essence to life that you cannot get from business books. And in spiritual books, the Bhagavad Gita, it says, any man who can come face to face with success and failure and treat the two of them as equals is a man who has understood life. I may have paraphrased there, but you get the point. So this whole idea of I don't want to fail, but if you look at it right, look at it very well. Ask people, okay, why don't you want to fail? Like, why are you afraid of failure? Right? You mostly hear things like, okay, well, if other proves that maybe you're not smart enough, maybe other people won't take you serious, maybe you may have wasted time along the line. But in the very end, like if you zoom out, just like there's a guy called Danko, if you're familiar with him, Danko says that he has gotten about $6 million from his online business. And the one reason his online business became successful is because he had a stack of skills that he got from other past failed businesses. And the beautiful thing is, I keep telling people that if you watch Steve Jobs' story, his life or his videos online, there is no way you will not grab life philosophies. Steve Jobs basically said, he said, yeah, that's my train of thought there. I was talking about, no, not stay hungry, stay foolish. Steve Jobs, Danko, yes. Steve Jobs says, you cannot connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect the dots looking backward. So what that basically means is that, yes, you are going to rely heavily on faith. You're going to need faith to get you to that position where you can say, yes, I think it's worth it. I think the failures were worth it. If you think about it, the bulbs that we have in our rooms, in our homes these days, was actually pushed by somebody who had over 1,000 failures. Do you know what it means to have 1,000 failures? In fact, if you wrap your head around what 1,000 failure is, let's imagine he was failing twice every day. That is 500 days. Let's imagine he was failing 3 times every day. That is still about 300 days. That's about a year of not giving up about creating this bulb. I'm saying this not as a way of motivating you, but as a way of trying to make it logical to you that, yes, you might feel that idea, that emotion of being judged, right? Just because I don't want to fail, or if I fail, they might not think I'm that smart, right? To me, I feel that different things. And speaking of failure, one thing I think has really helped me when it comes to content is I have failed a lot of content. Speaking of, in every single instance of this conversation, you would always see how we connect. Mr. Beast, one of the world's most popular content creator, literally says that in his first 100 videos, he never cared about anything. What that means is he made 100 videos every day. What's his name? That's a Mr. Beast. Had the meeting with 4 guys every day for I think a number of days, while he made over 100 videos. He said he never cared about anything for the first 100 videos. Now, he's telling people the secret, but people will assume that they want to get to where Mr. Beast is overnight. So it's like, it's like, give us the real source. And speaking of giving us the real source, anybody who has basically pioneered any field, anybody who has basically done anything that felt like it was new, if you zoom out, they were mostly figuring it out. They were mostly trying to understand, or just they're trying to like be, but they're just playing their cards. Because if you still zoom out and see how everything in this world comes together, you see that Nike has a marketing slogan of "Just Do It." Just Do It by Nike is not marketing. It is a life philosophy that if you have something that you want to do, just do it. Because at some point, it's going to click. At some point, it's going to work. So if you just learn how to do it, right, you're in the very end playing to your own strength. Speaking about just doing it, let me think of another area. So Naval Ravikant also made a statement like this when he says that Naval Ravikant said that the people who pioneered industries, they were doing something which is called tinkering. Tinkering means that they were just experimenting. They couldn't be sure if it was going to work. So what that means is this whole idea of I want to be sure, I want to do a lot of market analysis. But bro, if what you have, right, I feel like there are nuances to this because a lot of people like to do marketing research, probability. Why? Because investors want to know that. Other people want to know that. But you see the same thing that if you do it regardless, if you just do it, that is why if you watch my videos up until this moment, I am just doing it. Whether it's short form, long form, I am doing it because of I think I genuinely like it. And because I'll be here for almost for life, why am I rushing? Also, people try to when people ask for how people became successful, more often than not, a lot of them are asking for a shortcut, right? It's like, what's the tip? What's the trick? What can I do to get there quick? But why in the first place are you trying to get there quick if you actually zoom out? Like, what's your reward for getting there quick? Then you begin to zoom out and ask yourself, okay, truly, yeah, it's a real question. What's the reward? Why are you trying to get there quick? Now, speaking of how to actually apply this in, like, if you're like, for example, me, at some point, give or take 2 years ago or a year ago, I was very rusty talking to women, and I think I'm proud to say it. And I became better at it by talking to them, seeing the mistake I made, and not making the same mistake with the next person. All of a sudden, one lady I was talking to told a guy that, oh, I am very smooth around women. I'm saying that, well, in my head, I'm telling myself that, well, I'm still someone who is learning, right? So I don't actually see myself as somebody who is that good. But this is the harsh truth. You're going to have to walk through the fire. I literally have somebody, because this person was basically telling somebody else to come and learn from me. I'm saying that, to be very, very honest, I really find it very difficult to even sell a course on that, right? Because when people try to buy courses, yes, they are trying to, some wise people are trying to get perspective. Some other wise people are trying to get shortcuts, how to gimmick the system. So what mostly happens is, a lot of guys, they understand that psychology, they understand that this person is looking for shortcuts. So they give you gimmicks that don't really make sense. For example, is when you're talking to a lady, ignore her. Because when you ignore her, right, she becomes much more interested. But in reality, when you're talking to a woman, right, you're talking to a woman that you want to be with, what you should do is that if you're a man who has this purpose, who has something going on for him, you don't necessarily have to leave what you're doing to focus on her, right? She has to understand that she's coming into your world. You're creating a framework. Okay, fine. Yes, I'm currently creating a world for the two of us. So I will give you a peek into my world. If you're interested, I may not have, you may not have access, you may not have the part of me all of the time, but you may have all of me part of the time. You see how the difference is? But because these guys don't understand these things, they create gimmickal courses, then this guy purchases the courses and still they don't work. It doesn't work for them. Because why? Those guys, they don't understand that the people they're referring to are basically afraid of failure. That is the real thing that they are afraid of. They are afraid of failing. So, I think it's because you, my friend, you on the other side, I'm giving you reasons why you should consider failing. What that means is, why don't you consider talking to these people, talking to women, to the point where, speaking of talking to women, if you know Mark Manson, the author of The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, Mark Manson says that in a podcast that there's a certain guy who felt like his goal actually was to go out there and become rejected by women, right? And after some time, he stopped being rejected by women because he gave up the fear of being rejected. So he allowed him to show up in a much more authentic and free way. And trust me, when you approach women and you are free within yourself, not like you are free within yourself, to some extent, sometimes you may have to walk around like a cocky bastard. I'm not saying you should be a cocky bastard, but if you have this delusion in your head and you're approaching them, to some extent they can feel it and it's interesting to them. Now, there's always a caveat. I'm not telling you to be a cocky bastard, right? So I have like a couple of notes here. Let me see where. Now, speaking of decision, because I always digress in my videos. Now, Amazon, Jeff Bezos, Amazon has like a shit ton of failures, even though they have like one of the wildest successes. Amazon is a company that has been studied by different people from different angles over and over again, and you would always be shocked by whatever it is that you see. So Amazon, like Jeff Bezos has what is called, Jeff Bezos operates with some very strong principles, and those principles served him for decades. That is before people even knew. Before he became the world's richest man, he was doing these things. That is why I tell people to always study principles. If you study principles, just know that it's a matter of time. It's perfect. Most people are looking for practices, but the honest truth is that practices would always change. Right? I could create a course and give you some practices that work, but if you don't understand the principles behind them, you have a problem. Right? So in every area of life, there are principles. To have relationships, there are principles. To build a business, there are principles. To have a healthy relationship, there are principles. So Jeff Bezos has principles, and one of his principles that helped him, has helped Amazon to keep failing. I said them had the highest success. It's called their decision-making process. So now, there are two kinds of decisions that Amazon makes, right? The one first decision is the decision that it is irreversible. The moment you make that decision, there's no going back. It may have to do with things that involve regulation, maybe purchasing a company, but you know that there's no going back. What that means is, he says they need a very high degree of certainty. They bring consultants, they bring people, they double check, just making sure that they don't make these dumbest choices. Now, the second kind of decision, the decision they know that they can live with the consequences of. So they are no longer afraid to make the choice. And it says that in choices like this, what they need is about a 51% certainty. Because the worst that could happen is what? Money wasted, effort wasted. You move on. I mean, if you think about the fact that Amazon created AWS and people never saw it profitable for the first 7 years. You know how crazy it is for you to be that good? That you create something that is so powerful and so profitable, and for 7 years, the competition did not realize that it was that profitable. Sorry, mind you, my alarm for going to the gym is just popping up anyhow. You can see how crazy it is. So now they said that the perfect decision does not exist in hindsight. Remember when Steve Jobs said, "You cannot connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect the dots looking backward." You see how life philosophies come together. That is why I said, if you begin to look at principles and begin to see that everything is connected, it is why I tell people to please read spiritual books, right? And say that everything is connected. You see how Steve Jobs is talking from an angle, from a perspective, and Jeff Bezos is coming from a different perspective, and yet they are both correct because they have built successful companies backed by these principles. And speaking of principles, there's a book that was written about Jeff Bezos, about the day one principles. And I think it's Amazon's principles to success, and the fact that the first letter that Jeff Bezos wrote to his shareholders, the principles got from that letter is still what he lives by till today. And Amazon is still successful till today. There are reasons for that. The reason Apple is still successful till today. So surround yourself with great, watch their interviews. You will get a lot of ideas from them. So he says, okay, fine. The perfect decisions are decisions that you look back and say, yes, they were worth it. Not the decisions that you make that are super calculated. Because to be very frank, think about it. If you've ever made choices in your life, you get to realize that sometimes the choices that you make that were super calculated turn out to be big mistakes in the future. So what do? Do you want to regret so far? So it says, if you want to create a pro-failure philosophy is this philosophy that, you know what, we're going to encourage failure until we see massive success. We're going to keep trying out a lot of things until we see massive success. So in this book, it says, 1, remove bureaucracy. This is for people who are building big companies. This is where things like office politics come in, agenda movement come in. People begin to set agendas that may derail the company. This is where people, for example, I see these big companies, right? Because I used to work as a freelancer. I worked with a couple of them. And somebody would rather hold down the company's contract just because he wants his department to look good. He has some ulterior motive behind him. So this is where things like bureaucracy comes in, and you should be able to remove it if that is your company. Second thing is, fix the incentives. Now, it says that if people are not being paid more than, if people don't see a reward in bringing something to the table, they will not bring it to the table. The irony is, if they don't see a reward and incentive to becoming better, why should they become better? So I keep telling people, let me just digress a bit. Whenever as I hear people say this like, oh, where are the ladies not? Where are the men not? When I ask them, why should they? What is the incentive behind it? All of a sudden, the thought process becomes different. Even though there's an incentive, I asked, what is the punishment if it doesn't work out? Then that is where you find the answer. So why am I not getting married? What's the incentive towards getting married? You may point out this, that. Now, what is the punishment towards getting married? Now the answer is obvious. I'm not here to debate whether marriage is good or not. I really believe that marriage is a healthy option. It's a very healthy option. But things have changed. The world is evolving. The world is adapting to something that we are not used to. So third point here is so regarding incentive is reward people for putting in that effort, right? Some companies realize, some companies also have a way of creating a culture where people just want to bring out the best in them. What that means is they're not really drawn by monetary incentive. They are drawn because they bought this vision and they want to make this vision a reality for them. The third point is promote and fire. Now you see that there's sometimes some people literally hinder progress of a company just because they want themselves to look good. They want to make sure that their name is there. I've seen this thing over and over again. They want to be the source of the company's win. If the company doesn't, if the win does not pass through them, they want to hinder it. While there are people who genuinely, they are bringing their best foot forward. So it means that if you look at people who are bureaucratic, who are hindering progress, fire them. If you look at if you see people who are trying their best to put the company's vision and mission first, those people should be promoted. I mean, it's basic common sense, Then measure accurately. This is where you have things like KPIs, key performance indexes. These are metrics that allow people to know how much effort one is bringing to the table. And he says that you cannot really improve what you can't measure, right? And it's the honest truth. If you can't measure it, you really can't make progress on it. You can only have an idea of progress, but if it is not being tracked, there's very little to nothing that you can do. And the fifth one is share the failure. Whenever somebody fails, instead of seeing it as a failure, see it more as a lesson that has learned. See it more as something that needs to be shared, and people should not be blamed for it, right? So what that means is if somebody fails because, like I said, some people are held back. They don't want to fail because of the judgments that will come after failure. What would they think about me? This is what holds a lot of smart people back, because they know why a project will succeed, right? And they also know why a project will not succeed. So I think to myself, right? Because to be very, very frank, I'm not here to brag, but I think I have to some degree, I have a good level of IQ. But to be very frank, I often see this thing working against me. So whenever I have an idea, right? Even though I have these philosophies, because everybody knows what to do, but when it is time to make a decision, all of a sudden things become funny. But what I do is I have people, right, who I would say are not so smart, quote unquote. What I do is I bring the idea to them, right, so that they can help me. They can point out the obvious common sense thing to do, and I do it. Literally, I literally just do it, because to be very frank, I know why it's going to succeed and also know why it's not going to succeed. My style of videos are boring. I know that. I don't script. Sometimes I look at my screen, I talk, but the fact that I look at my screen does not devalue my point, right? I don't have music, I don't have beats, I don't chop it up too much, but I know that if I am creating what is valuable, it's going to click, right? Just do it, right? So I have this philosophy in my head. So if you're somebody who is smart, try that approach, right? Talk to people who you think are less smart and do it. What's the worst case? You will fail, and guess what? You have made progress. You have learned something, regardless. So now, what I wrote here is something that I think I would like to read out carefully. Now, failure is not a bad thing. You increase your chances of success, you need to increase your chances of failure. Every time something is tried and found not to work, valuable information is gained. That can be shared with the team, with everybody. Business that experiment faster, they fail faster, then they continue to experiment. Always they outpace the competition. Why? They are doing more things, they are making more movement, they are making more momentum. And speaking of this, in case I watch this video early, just know that about 3 months from now, I'll be creating something that people want to benefit from. It has a paid community. I have plans to create products, and I don't know how it's going to go. And by the way, if you probably noticed, that is why right now I'm creating videos every single day. And I'm trying to improve the way I speak, the way I articulate ideas, the way I bring those ideas. But let me just leave you, because I think it's time to head out. Failure is actually feedback. When you fail, you get feedback. That feedback is knowledge, valuable knowledge you may not have gotten from the books. That knowledge is equal to power. And when you say failure is power, you should know where it's coming from. That is why failure itself is very, very powerful. So yes, trust me, I mean that this particular episode was one that made me realize that the more I fail at something, the better I get at it. So I want you to go and grab a copy of this book, because there was almost I discussed some ideas to write, but some things that I may have missed out, but they will be super important to you. So I feel like please check it out. And if you can't read the book for some reasons, right, feel free to listen to the Diary of a CEO podcast. It's by Stephen Bartlett, and he has very, very good people on his podcast. His podcast would actually educate you on a lot of stuff. So if you made it this far, I know that you are somebody who loves to take himself very, very serious. You are seriously trying to improve yourself, and I must give you credit for that. Thank you very much for staying this far. Kindly, just you need to share this video with somebody who you know, right? Who you know is afraid of failure, and who you know is serious about improving his life. It's that selfless act of you sharing this video that would help people become less fearful of failure and help the movement to move faster. Thank you very much for staying this long, and I'll see you very soon. Share the video, share the love.